Macy's has all of your Grill Master essentials for Father's Day. Stop by to get our hand-trimmed chicken breast and certified Angus beef patties that are ready to grill, so Dad can have his favorite dinner. Make sure to browse our bakery to find the perfect no-work Father's Day treat with our decadent peanut butter bars or famous donuts. Right now, you can get boneless beef ribeye steaks for $12.99 per pound at Macy's. Shop these Father's Day essentials in-store or online at Macys.com through June 18th. Macy's, happy shopping!
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast and are not intended to malign any religion, group, club, organization, business, individual, anyone, or anything. I'm Sarah Edmondson.
And I'm Anthony, air quotes nippy, Ames.
And this is A Little Bit Culty, a podcast about what happens when things that seem like a great thing at first go bad.
Every week, we chat with survivors, experts, and whistleblowers for real cult stories told directly by the people who lived through them.
Because we want you to learn a few things we've had to learn the hard way.
Like, if you think you're too smart to get sucked into something culty, you're already prime recruitment material.
You might even already be in a cult.
Oops. You better keep listening to find out.
Welcome to Season 6 of A Little Bit Culty. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to this week's very special episode of A Little Bit Culty.
It's been well over a year since we started our voicemail line, and we've gotten tons of voicemails. And now we just got to clean that mailbox out and clear some space for more voicemails.
But before we do that...
I need to clear my throat.
Yes, clear your throat. But before we do that, we wanted to do an episode, a series of them actually, where we revisit some of our favorite voicemails from listeners and respond to a few of them that we didn't get to before for whatever reason. Sorry, it's been a huge onslaught of mail.
We've also been responding to voicemails in many of our weekly bonus drops for Patreon subscribers, but we wanted the rest of our audience to hear some of those too.
Honestly, we just hear too much of our own voices, so frankly, we just love this chance to amplify our listeners.
Because this podcast wouldn't even exist without you guys. We started this thing on a whim, and it's crazy to think that here we are in the top 100 of our category and have now done over 10 million downloads in almost 4 years.
That's crazy.
Did you think it was going to be that after we heard the first episode?
No.
We were both like, no fucking way.
This isn't going anywhere. But thanks to you, our dear listeners and our Patreon supporters and everyone who's subscribing and supporting us from a distance. It means a lot to us because we love doing it and we know that you apparently love to listen. So thank you. And thanks to everyone who called in with a voicemail. You can keep doing that. If you are not signed up to our newsletter, that's where we are announcing everything that we are up to here at A Little Bit Culty. In the newsletter, we share things that are coming up, like Nippy and I are going to be involved with a summit with Seek Safely, which includes a number of our past guests, Dr. Glenn Doyle and Ann Peterson from the Landmark episode, as well as Chris Shelton and Rachel Bernstein from the Indoctrination podcast. That summit is for anybody who would like to still be a seeker and want to do it safely, or if you're a practitioner and want to figure out how to make the personal development space safer. So we're really excited to be part of that conversation. October 19th, it's a day-long event. You can find that information on the events page on our website. So stay tuned for our announcement of Season 7 starting on October 28th. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate your support.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. And let's take a listen to what our listeners have to say. Yeah?
Hi, Sarah and Nippy. My name is Julie. I love your show. I've learned so much about the cultiverse, and I loved The Vow. I'm always intrigued by some of the cults or the cult-like organizations that you guys cover and expose, I guess. I am curious. I have lots of friends who are involved with Airbon and this other company, Optavia. And I know that they seem to be these MLMs, But I'm just curious what your thoughts are on these companies that pop up that tend to attract women in their 30s and 40s who are looking to maybe work from home or quit their corporate jobs. And just wondering if you are familiar with these companies and what you thought of them, and if they reek culty to you as they do to me.
Well, Julie, we actually have done 3 different episodes on MLMs, starting with
They're all culty, by the way. We have Brandy Hatfield,
Roberta Blevins,
and Douglas Brooks, who actually litigated those things.
Those episodes really explain why all MLMs are problematic and more than a little bit culty. Some MLMs seem to be more exploitative than others in their practices, but all of them basically are a bait and switch and provide false promises as a lure to get people in. That's the main problem.
At worst, have lobbyists in Washington that have laws that protect the abusers. So I would highly recommend listening to either Roberta Blevins and Brandy Hatfield to hear how they get you in, and then the Douglas Brooks one to hear how the abusers are protected legally. So yeah, very culty and hard to hold accountable. And
Emily Lynn Paulson wrote a book called Hey Hun about her experience in a cult that shall remain nameless, but may or may not be Arbonne or something else like Arbonne. And we will just say that we love these questions, and a lot of people reach out asking for help how to deal with friends who are in it. And I'd say, don't say you're in a cult. That's not helpful. But ask them questions, gentle questions about the structure and how they earn money, and if they've ever actually calculated if they are earning money, because most of the time they are not. Thank you, Julie, for that question. Next up, Susie has a voicemail about the cult of one and the good vibes only thing in her particular industry. She says Sarah, but she meant to say Sarma, aka the bad vegan, our dear friend. Let's see what she had to say.
Hi, guys. My name is Susie, and I'm calling from Mesa, Arizona. And I actually stumbled across your podcast when you had Sarah on after I watched her Netflix video. And something she said really struck me about the cult of one. I was actually in a very mentally, emotionally, spiritually abusive relationship about 16 years ago. I'm now 56 years old. So when I was 36 to 40, and just the power of the cult of one is just so overwhelming to think about. And when Sarah was talking about that, that really hit home. And then the other thing that I really struggle with in my community is I actually work for a mortgage company, and I work a lot with the real estate community, and it's the good vibes only cult. I really struggle with that, especially with everything that's going on in the world. And I have a lot of friends, and in my industry, there's a lot of messaging around the toxic positivity and just ignoring everything that's happening around us, around the world, around them, and just choosing to stay in their own protected space, if you will. And I really, really struggle with that. Yeah, so those are my thoughts. Thank you guys so much for what you're doing. Just know it matters, and we hear you and we see you, and we love you for your truth and your authenticity. So keep shining, keep doing what you're doing. And yeah, that's my word salad for the night. Thank you so much.
I wouldn't call that word salad. I appreciate that. It was very articulate, I thought.
Yeah, and clear.
To answer that, toxic positivity is exactly that. It is really toxic. And we see that a lot these days, especially in the documentary we watched, American Sweethearts, about the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. Obviously a totally different atmosphere than real estate. But the fact is, if you can't express something that you're unhappy with or a complaint about something without being shamed or tacitly punished somehow, that's just a toxic atmosphere. And it's not realistic. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's also one, when people get into the cult of one, it has so much shame around it that a lot of people are afraid to call it out. And toxic positivity is normally the precursor to something like that.
Yeah, I feel like obviously it's not a true cult, but that's not a good atmosphere to live in.
Well, also, a lot of people's personality is based on toxic positivity, right? So It's like, it's a hard one to call out too, because it has plausible deniability. So it's a tricky one. I tend to just shut down around it and hope it goes away and train the person that what they're doing isn't working.
Thank you, Susie.
This next one is from Eve Leonard. She has a voicemail about Evan Rachel Wood and the fetish BDSM and consent.
Hey, it's Sarah and Nippy. This is Eve from New Jersey. Thank you so much for all the advocacy work that you're doing. I think it's really important. I wanted to make a comment about the Evan Rachel Wood interview. First off, I loved Phoenix Rising. And one of the reasons I appreciate that documentary is because Evan does an excellent job at pinpointing exactly where Brian was abusive and defining that abuse of power. And people who are in those lifestyles, the gothic lifestyle, the queer lifestyle, it's our previous conversations about abuse and sexual fetishes often get very blurred, and we associate the lifestyle with the abuse. That used to be very evident. I know when I was growing up in the 80s and the 90s, if you engaged in these kinds of lifestyles, those lifestyles in of themselves were abusive. And I think we need to do a better job culturally separating the two. There is a space to engage in sexual fetishes that's completely consensual and can even deepen the intimacy within a relationship. However, if we consistently compare abuse with a sexual fetish, as a result, the audience will come away thinking that any kind of sexual fetish will lead to abuse. And that in and of itself just isn't true. A documentary that does a really good job at separating the two is Camus Bell's documentary on Showtime called We Need to Talk About Cosby, where within all of the people that he interviewed, one of them was a sex educator. And the sex educator specifically pointed out that there is a space for somebody to engage in role play, to engage in more dominant submissive behavior, but in a completely consensual way. And I think we just need to talk about that a little bit more and discuss and educate people to clearly understand when something that could be consensual, when it turns to be non-consensual, identifying what that looks like. And I think that can be much more beneficial to a wider audience. Thank you so much for everything you do. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my response to that is coercion is coercion. And it doesn't matter if it's around sexual behavior or getting someone to do something they don't want to do. I think getting sensitive to how people are going against their instincts to do something they don't want to do is irrelevant of the content point. And sure, yeah, there's probably things in the sexual community or the BDSM that people get coerced in. But I think if it's a clear exchange and everyone's agreeing on it, that settles any sort of argument you might have, regardless if it's, come to my party, I coerce you to go to my party or whatever it is sexually. I don't think the content doesn't really matter. I think once you're coerced, you're coerced.
Sidebar, there was a coach in Vancouver who was not part of DOS, and she was still in when shit blew up. And when she heard that there was no safe word in DOS and there was no way out, that once you were in, and you were just the slave to the master till the end of time. And she was involved in the BDSM community, and she was like, well, that doesn't work. And that was enough for her to see that it wasn't safe. So I thought that was really interesting. Thank you, Eve, for that message. This podcast certainly would not be happening without our amazing, supportive, generous patrons. Are you with us? Come find us over on Patreon at patreon.com/alittlebitculty for bonus episodes, ad-free and exclusive content, and the occasional Zoom with fan favorites from our past episodes, Q&As, and all sorts of goodies. It's fun over there, people.
Want to start making positive changes for your health? With Lumen, all you have to do is breathe. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a small handheld device that measures metabolism through your breath. Then on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs and gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workouts, sleep, and even stress management. To get started, all you have to do is breathe into Lumen first thing in the morning. It'll let you know what's going on with your metabolism, whether you're burning mostly fats or carbs. Then, the app creates a tailored nutrition plan for the day based on your measurements, helping you stay your healthiest. Breathe into Lumen before and after workouts and meals throughout the day for even more insights in your metabolism. Because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, taking care of your metabolic health translates to a bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, and even a better night's sleep. It's a little handheld device. You blow into it, it measures, and you kind of look cool doing it, at least to my kids. So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/Culty to get 15% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/Culty for 15% off your purchase.
Do you think you could be manipulated out of a bad habit? Scamfluencers is a weekly podcast from Wondery that takes you along the twists and turns of the most infamous scams of all time, the impact on victims, and what's left once the facade falls away. Scamfluencers recently dove into the story of Richard Bandler, the godfather of modern mental manipulation. He revolutionized the world of self-help, all thanks to an approach he developed called neuro-linguistic programming. Even though NLP worked for some, many called it pseudoscience. NLP methods have been criticized for being dangerous in the wrong hands and inspiring some of the most toxic and criminal self-help movements of the last 2 decades. Throw in Richard's dark past as a cocaine addict and a murder suspect, and you can't help but wonder what his true intentions were. Follow Scamfluencers on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can listen to Scamfluencers and more Exhibit C true crime shows like Morbid and Kill List, early and ad-free right now by joining Wondery Plus. Check out Exhibit C in the Wondery app for all your true crime listening. You've heard from our sponsors. Now let's get back to a little bit culty, shall we? Next up, we have Ollie on a Nexium voicemail. What does Ollie have to say?
Ooh, racy.
Hey, y'all. I just want to reach out and say thanks for the podcast and thanks for your work on the vow. I've been watching it for the second time in 2 weeks this week, watching with a friend who was really just struggling to understand how people got drawn into DOS and why people didn't balk at the slavery and those kind of things that when you're looking at it from the outside seem obviously horrific. And I just finished Alexandra Stein's book, Terror, Love and Brainwashing, which I got onto through the podcast, so thank you. But what struck me when I was watching was that we as outsiders were watching this from an objective perspective, whereas you were in an attachment relationship with Keith and with the organization which had become like your family. And you guys have talked about having other connections and still having a life outside. But it was pretty clear that in terms of purpose and values and where you wanted to go in life, you know, Sarah, you talked about thinking you're going to do that forever. And it just really, really struck me that if you watch someone's experience from the outside without understanding it as if it was the closest attachment, the closest friend, the closest person in your life doing those things, and how much more you would justify and rationalize and accept some of those behaviors, along with, you know, we know the incremental nature of what you were put through, that no one, as you said, no one said on day one, this is what's going to happen. They said, you know, come and reach your potential and come for human growth and la, 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 and all that shit. That's not shit, but that they use as bait to get you in there. And so it just really struck me how wrenching it is when those attachments are ripped apart, and how much those attachments hold us in those just shitty situations that are really hard to understand from the outside. So I want to thank you for your bravery and just sharing your story so openly. I love what you both bring to the struggle, and I love the guests you bring on and the way that you work through your interview process with them is really wonderful. So thank you so much, and keep going. I love it.
Thanks, Ollie. Those are very kind words. And yeah, first of all, we loved that book by Alexandra Stein, Terror, Love, and Brainwashing. Such a basically masterclass in how these things work. And we've actually referred to the book a lot for our second book in looking at the template in regards to how these con men get you and what you just said is so key. It is that whether it's you're looking at it from the attachment point of view or what trust is being leveraged, regardless, had some random person that I met on the street tell me about NXIVM, I probably would not have joined. It was Mark Vicente and what he meant to me and how much I trusted him that brought me in. Similarly to joining DOS, even if Allie Mack or one of the other women in NXIVM had invited me to DOS, I probably wouldn't have joined. But because it was Lauren had that sway over me in terms of the level of trust and me putting her on her pedestal. And, she could tell me to jump and I'd probably say how high. So part of that's on me and part of that is on her and the structure of the company that we were in terms of abusing power from the top.
First off, Ollie, 2 times in 2 weeks. I haven't watched it 2 times in 7 years. So I don't know how you sat through that. But I guess because it wasn't you. Thank you for saying that. And thank you. It sounds like you have a good understanding and foundation to understand what you're looking at, which is what we are trying to get people to do. So thank you for saying those things. And yes, everything you said was true. I don't think I'm going to add much to what you just said. So thank you.
Thanks, Ollie.
Okay, now we're going to go back to a batch of voicemails all about one of our most controversial episodes since we started the podcast, Eckhart Tolle. And needless to say,
we were surprised.
Yes.
And I will say it was one of my most interesting and exciting interviews, especially to do it in person. But
hard to get a word in.
Definitely hard to get a word in. And that's fine. It's Eckhart. Just let him rip.
Yep. And he did.
What did Christine from Calgary have to say? Let's find out.
Hi, Sarah and Nippy. It's Christine calling from Calgary. I just listened to Eckhart Part 1, and that's my mind exploding. I really liked your interview with him. I cannot wait for more. And I have been a longtime follower on and off throughout the years of Eckhart's work. And, I couldn't help but think about people's reaction to Eckhart as your guest and people being critical that he is a little bit culty. And it got me thinking about Eckhart's work, and sometimes the way he communicates is word salad-esque. And so the deeper you go into his work, the more it does seem to make sense. But I have to admit that there are times where I think it's a little too esoteric and it can leave the listener feeling like, what WTF, this is some other planet that this character's on, and therefore I don't trust him whatsoever. So that's the comment part. The question piece is around, Sarah, when you met Eckhart in Vancouver, and I know he hangs around coffee shops and he's like quite visible in Vancouver, but then the fact that he was so open and willing to spend time with you over a number of years, and I just can't help but feel like that's some kind of divine intervention, or if you don't believe in that, the universe putting in front of you exactly what you need when you need it. And I wondered if you could comment further on that, because I know you're a little more woo than Nippy is, but perhaps you'd be willing to comment on air about the significance from your perspective of Eckhart popping up in your life and then becoming an ally for you and someone to work with as you are healing. Love you both. Keep up the good work. Keep kicking ass out there. Love your show. Bye.
Christine, thank you. First of all, Christine's very active on our social, I think on Patreon too, but just really supportive of us. It's nice to hear your voice.
Yeah, it is.
And if I recall, yes, I'm definitely more woo than Nippy.
Well, what does woo mean?
You mean more open to things we can't measure, spiritual things and whatnot.
Getting there,
He's getting there. But I will say that at the time, a lot of things were happening as we were leaving, like in literally the week after NXIVM. And I think this is in my book, but people came out of the woodwork. I of course, lost my income very, very quickly. And then I booked at the same week a huge voiceover campaign. I got offered a lead in a Hallmark movie without auditioning opposite Andy McDowell, which is related to, it's not a tangent, to how I connected with Eckhart is that I'd just been on set with Andy, and she'd been talking about how, there's only a few people that she would be starstruck by. And one of them, she said, was Eckhart Tolle. And I just remembered that. And then literally, I think it was a couple days later, and she had said that about his work, that she loved his work and would love to meet him. And then I bumped into him, and it was, I think I said this in the episode, I was walking over to him to say hi. I knew him before I realized who it was. It was somebody familiar that was oh, hi. And then I was oh my God, I don't know you. I know you because you're famous. And part of the conversation was telling him that Andy McDowell loves his work. And he said that he loved Groundhog Day. So when I went back to work, I was still working with her. It was over a couple of weeks. I told her this, and I made the introductions, and then I stayed in touch with him. And yeah, the whole couple weeks was very, I don't want to say magical because Nippy teases me when I say that, but it all kind of lined up in this wonderful way. So yeah, I do think that it was divine timing, or it was meant to be, or whatever you want to say. All those words I'm still kind of allergic to, but I appreciated him being in my life at that time. And we had many wonderful conversations before the podcast for lunch where we would sit and talk. And the main nugget I got from him was just really the idea of spirituality and toxic spirituality, and not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And that was a decision that I made early on, partly thanks to Eckhart, that I could keep some of the things I'd learned if I could separate it from the toxic teacher, which was clearly Keith. I think he was also just sort of fascinated with how somebody like Keith got into power, and how he wanted to know and understand. And we talked about it for him as well. How does he have an organization, and, how does he keep people in check and make sure that, things don't get out of control or there's any abuses of power. But I personally love the episode. I understand how it certainly can be word salad-esque at times, but I also feel like it's just sort of how he talks. And it doesn't, just because it sounds like word salad doesn't mean it is word salad. I think word salad is meant to confuse somebody. I don't think he's trying to confuse anyone.
Well, also, I think
it's just confusing.
Yeah, when people are doing word salad, they don't really know what they're talking about. And it seems to me that when he's speaking, knows what he's saying, but can't necessarily control how you're going to interpret it. And if you interpret it and you don't make sense of it, I don't know that it's necessarily Eckhart's fault or intent. What I will say is when I listen to other podcasts, because Eckhart was kind of talking one way and it wasn't really us questioning and getting him to define his terms. Mm-hmm. A lot of other podcasts is primarily when they're philosophical, people are really diligent and adamant about you defining the terms. When you use a word, they go, okay, let's discuss what that word means. And there's a dialogue, whereas
this wasn't a dialogue.
Eckhart's was more of a monologue. And then if you can't, I had impulses to ask questions, but there wasn't a natural pause in the question. So I felt more at the whim of when he was going to pause for air, or I just kind of ceded to the fact, okay, this is him getting his message through, and that's what he's used to and customary to, and not someone going, well, wait, let's define consciousness.
Let's have a conversation about that.
And it didn't lend to that, and I decided that I think I'm in listening mode more so than define your terms mode. So that's what can be a little tricky.
Yes. And we are still in touch with him. And I posted something about, I think I went to hear him speak around this time. And one of the leaders in the cult space reached out to me and said, that's a cult. He's a cult. And I said, I disagree. I think he's one of the good ones. Do I think maybe there could be culty stuff in his organization? Sure. It's a big organization and there's humans running them, and that can happen. And as we know, any group can become culty. But do I think he's a good person? And do I think, yes. And do I think he's trying to hurt anybody? No. But that's, I've been wrong before. So
we have been wrong before.
I'll never,
it's a documentary about how wrong we were.
You may have seen it. You might recognize me.
It's well documented how
on
wrong
such shows as The Vow on HBO. Escaping Nexium with Josh Block. Anyway, but I like him. That's my 2 cents. For more background on what brought us here, check out my page-turning memoir. It's called Scarred, the true story of how I escaped Nexium, the cult that bound my life. It's available on Amazon, Audible, and at most bookstores. And if you want to see that story in streaming form, you can watch both seasons of The Vow on HBO.
Okay, I know we've all been told that when it comes to receiving gifts, it's the thought that counts. There's that element of surprise, sure, but if I'm being honest, nothing beats getting exactly what you wanted. And with Sarah, that's extremely difficult sometimes. That's why when it comes to buying jewelry, there's no better place than BlueNile.com to get exactly what you want. Not only do I love the thousands of independently graded diamonds and fine jewelry at prices significantly below traditional retail, but their team of jewelry experts is on call to answer any questions 24/7, especially if you want to get something sports related like that tennis bracelet. Wink, wink. So say you're hypothetically struggling to figure out which hoop earrings work best for your face shape, which I do all the time. You can call or chat with Blue Nile's team to find the perfect pair, anytime. Blue Nile also offers peace of mind with every purchase with 30-day returns and a diamond price match guarantee. They make online jewelry shopping easy, which shouldn't be a surprise. They've been doing since 1999. So what are you waiting for? Go to BlueNile.com to find the perfect piece today. That's BlueNile.com, BlueNile.com. Your significant other will thank you. I know Sarah will.
Hey parents, it's time to gear up for the school year at the outlets at Traverse Mountain. We've got all the essentials from first aid fits to backpacks, jackets, sneakers, and more. And all for an additional 25% off the outlet prices at participating stores. Send your kids back to school in style with top name brands like Nike, American Eagle, The North Face, The Children's Place, H&M, Converse, Quicksilver, and more at unbeatable outlet prices. Make this school year the best one yet at the outlets at Traverse Mountain. Visit outlets at traversemountain.com for all the sales. Outlets at Traverse Mountain. I-15 exit 284, Lehigh.
Break time's over, people. Let's get back to this episode of A Little Bit Culty. It's a good one.
Okay, so next up.
Here's another Eckhart message from Christina.
Hi, Sarah and Nippy. My name is Christina, and I was just listening to your episode, the first part of the Eckhart Tolle interview, and something he said really brought back to my memory this great YouTube personality. Her name on YouTube is Half of Carla, and she talks about her weight loss journey. And she said that the thing that helped her the most to lose weight was therapy, but that there was a moment, not in a therapy session, but while she was driving with her husband, when she finally had this realization that the negative thoughts that she had been focusing on so much throughout her life and that had been keeping her from losing the weight that she wanted to lose, those thoughts were not her thoughts. And it was like an out-of-body experience where she finally transcended her ego and was able to see that the thing that was holding her back, these negative thoughts, did not belong to her. And so what he said, Eckhart Tolle, really reinforced that feeling yeah, wait, there is this other thing going on inside of us, and we allow our ego to keep it trapped. But if we could find a way to release our sort of inner person, a lot of those issues that we have might just go away. This is a very simplified thing, but this is more a plug for Half of Carla because she's been such an inspiration to me on my own weight loss journey. So I really love what you guys are doing. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Christina. I agree.
Yeah. What I take from that is thoughts matter.
Yeah. I mean, ironically, in Nexium, we had this exercise that I've seen since in many other, like in Buddhism and different practices, where it's called the witness state or the observer state, where you get meta with yourself and you experience yourself having thoughts. Do you remember those exercises?
Yeah.
And there was actually a whole process where we were separating ourselves from our thoughts, from our behaviors, from our vocation, from our results, from our material. Do you remember all the different layers?
I forget.
It's been a long time.
The chronology was relevant.
Yeah, the chronology was relevant. But thought's one of the things that we try to say, we are not that. We are not our thoughts, which I do think there is a very valuable place for, especially if you're meditating and you're trying to be more present in the moment and not caught up in the steam train or the monkey mind, as they say in different practices. But that's ultimately what I think is the main nugget of his teaching, is having a transcendent experience of yourself separate from the ego, which in certain hands, like we've seen with people like Bentinho Massaro and certain spiritual teachers, where they can use that concept to spiritually bypass and also abuse and say, well, that's just a negative thought that you're having. I'm not a narcissistic douchebag. And that's just your projective thoughts. For example, all these things can be wonderful and be totally abused.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Yeah. No. Not more thoughts.
Okay.
No ego here.
No ego. Great. You're very present. You're in your consciousness. Oh, and also, we'll check out Half of Carla. That sounds like a good influence in a sea of shady influencers, especially in the whole weight loss diet culture space. What a mess that internet can be. And actually, we have some episodes coming up on that. So stay tuned.
Would Half of Carla be Carl?
I don't know.
No?
I don't know.
Should have did there.
That's a dad joke.
Oh, joke there.
Okay, last message from Allison about, you guessed it, Eckhart Tolle.
Hey, Sarah Nippy, it's Alison from Sydney, Australia. We've spoken before. Nippy, I know you like my accent. I just wanted to come to your voicemail to say thank you for sharing that episode with Eckhart. It was the best episode I've listened to. I know I say that about a lot of your episodes. It had a lot of moments in there with me, which will help with my educational piece for helping people that are leaving cults. The parts that resonated with me the most were when he was talking about, why people join cults and how they get us in, but also the last 10 minutes of that conversation where Sarah, you asked a really valid question about businesses and businesses, how they turn into cults. That was really important for me because I'm starting a new branch of my business and I am opening a yoga studio. So I do have concerns about it becoming culty, and I know that we've spoken about this before, Sarah. So I was really grateful to hear his insights on that, and checking in on yourself is a big thing, right? To not make that my identity. So I've shared those thoughts with my husband, and they'll all be in our business plan. And so thank you once again for everything you do. Keep producing, guys. It's gold medal stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison from Australia. Nippy, you do love her accent.
I love it, yeah.
It's great.
We've been here, yeah.
And I appreciate all your support.
A lot of support out of Australia, too.
Yes, shout out to our Aussie friends. I do really feel like it's just so wild that so many people, like Allison, said that this was their favorite episode. And then we had other people literally unsubscribe from our podcast because of our episode with Eckhart. So, I guess you win some, you lose some.
Yeah, sensitive audience, that's for sure.
But I also totally get how just the whole genre of Eckhart, if you had been in a spiritual cult, would be like super upsetting just because it's similar. Just like I can't go see somebody speak with a whiteboard because of executive success programs and Nexium. It's just too close to home. There's just too much.
Certain buzzwords and language too.
Yeah.
I'd say, good for you for wanting to check yourself for not being a cult, but most cult leaders don't do that, for one. And we have an episode with Cameron Harold.
About corporate culture?
He asked some good questions. And in our comment section, you'd have to scroll on our Instagram to see it. There's some really good questions, and it gets somewhat, I wouldn't say hostile, it just gets people get a little bit upset, but there are some blind spots that even, Sarah and I still have, and I think everyone has, when you get into a position where, let's say you have a job and they're dependent and, someone has a mortgage out in your house and you have healthcare, through the company and you can't leave. Those are certain things that, for people starting businesses, look out for because you're making people dependent on you. That can lead to, it doesn't sound like you're in jeopardy of abusing people, but if you recognize you have that power over people, that was one of the things that at least I learned for that, because Cameron, I think, said something like, you can always leave, but people can't always leave. And so those little things that people can get into are a slippery slope in businesses and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So
someone like Cameron could leave because he's a jet setter. He works from anywhere. He's not tied to a company. But I think the point is when people become dependent on a company, that's where
then the incentives become, and if I need you to stay and I know that you have a mortgage, 2 kids, and you're dependent on me, then
I'm leverage that.
The power dynamic is off, to say the least. It's not saying that you're going to abuse it, but look out for those.
Thank you, Allison. A lady named Charlie has a voicemail about her story of escape, recovery, and healing.
Hello, Nippy. Hi, Sarah. Anyone else on the production team that is listening. I wanted to thank you for your courage, for your loudness about all things culty. I've been following Sarah's story from the New York Times article, and I watched The Vow with my sister, and I listened to most of the ALBC episodes. See, I was raised in a cult, a Catholic cult. When I was 14, the rumors about our founder turned out to be true. He was a sexual predator who abused teens and others and was a criminal in a lot of other ways. It was a huge scandal, and my parents remained loyal to the cult for about another decade. I got out when I was 18 with one of my sisters. Fortunately, in the years since, my parents and the other members of my family slowly left. We've all gotten out. We've each begun our own individual healing journeys. I'm 28 now, and my parents have apologized to me and to my other siblings. It just never really felt like enough. I just couldn't understand where they were coming from. And because I didn't understand, I couldn't forgive. But through listening to your stories, Mark, Bonnie, India, Catherine's stories, listening to your guests, and hearing the information given by your expert guests about cult tactics, I've been able to understand how my parents were targeted for recruitment, the way that information was twisted, how their friendships and relationships were used like a reward system, and just how manipulated they were. And all the while, they thought that they were free and working for a good cause. And that's the whole point of the manipulation. Because of the stories that you shared, I've been able to find myself capable of forgiving my parents. And we've begun a new chapter in our lives as a family. We've begun healing our relationships. And I just want to let you know that as your work helps people become aware of cult tactics and avoid them, but it also helps me and my family to heal from the ways that cults have already hurt us. So thank you. Thank you so much. It's very impactful what you do. So thank you.
Well, I guess I didn't think I was going to cry in the voicemail episode. And
that makes what we do worth it. So thank you for sharing that. I'm so glad to hear that even just having a conversation with your parents about it has bridged a gap, and you guys can...
And you can understand them now.
Yeah.
That's a real gift, and gift for us to know that we can help in that way.
Yeah, living well is your best revenge on this thing. So I'm glad you're on that journey. That's awesome.
And so glad that you all got out too, and that you can start a new life afresh. So thank you, Charlie, for taking the time to tell us. Please do continue to leave us voicemails, everybody. It means a lot to us to engage in this way. And that was a great batch of voicemails. Thank you, callers. We are excited to keep going through the archives. We will be back soon with another full episode of your thoughts on all the things.
And since we're cleaning up the archives, there's plenty of space for new messages. So be sure to give us a shout. Leave us your message at alittlebitculty.com/voicemails. And who knows, you can end up being heard by 200,000 people and growing.
So make sure your car radio isn't blasting in the background, okay? Okay.
Be back soon with more A Little Bit Culty episodes, everyone.
Till next time. You like what you hear? Please do give us a rating, a review, and subscribe on iTunes or wherever you listen. Every little bit helps us get this cult awareness content out there. Smash that subscribe button. You know what to do.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean, I'm hanging on to the weight of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know I won't.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We're heading over to patreon.com/alittlebitculty now to discuss this episode. In the meantime, dear listener, please remember, this podcast is solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. It's not intended as a substitute for real medical, legal, or therapeutic advice. For cult recovery resources and to learn more about seeking safely in this culty world, check out alittlebitculty.com/culty resources, and don't miss Sarah's TED Talk called How Cult Literate Are You? Great stuff.
A Little Bit Culty is a Trace 120 production, executive produced by Sarah Edmondson and Anthony Nippy Ames, in collaboration with producer Will Rutherford at Citizens of Sound and our co-creator and show chaplain/bodyguard, Jess Tardy. And our theme song, Cultivated, is by John Bryant.
Macy's has all of your Grill Master essentials for Father's Day. Stop by to get our hand-trimmed chicken breast and certified Angus beef patties that are ready to grill, so Dad can have his favorite dinner. Make sure to browse our bakery to find the perfect no-work Father's Day treat with our decadent peanut butter bars or famous donuts. Right now, you can get boneless beef ribeye steaks for $12.99 per pound at Macy's. Shop these Father's Day essentials in-store or online at Macy's.com through June 18th. Macy's, happy shopping!
Okay, it's official. We are very much in the final sprint to Election Day. And face it, between debates, polling releases, even court appearances, it can feel exhausting, even impossible to keep up with. I'm Brad Milkey. I'm the host of Start Here, the daily podcast from ABC News. And every morning, my team and I get you caught up on the day's news in a quick, straightforward way that's easy to understand, with just enough context so you can listen, get it, and go on with your day. So, kickstart your morning. Start smart with Start Here and ABC News, because staying informed shouldn't feel overwhelming.
Hey moms, looking for some lighthearted guidance on this crazy journey we call parenting?
Join me, Sabrina Kohlberg.
And me, Andy Mitchell, for Pop Culture Moms,
where each week we talk about what we're watching
and examine our favorite pop culture moms up close to try to pick up some parenting hacks along the way.
Come laugh, learn, and grow with us as we look for the best tips.
And maybe a few what not to do's from our favorite fictional moms.
From Good Morning America and ABC Audio.
Pop Culture Moms. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.